لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله ما لنا رب سوى لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآل الطيبين الطاهرين. At the end of point 5, the late Allama said that although everything is somehow attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but with respect to miracles and acceptance of prayer of people who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is decisive, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills is going to happen certainly. So in the case of magic, or for example normal things, ordinary things, although still Allah's will is there, but they may happen or not. If they happen, it's according to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they don't happen, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not there. So when you have two things, one is a miracle, one is, for example, a magic, both are according to the will of God, but one of them is according to the will which is necessary, which is going to happen, the other one is not. His expression was this, that وَجَمِيعُ الْأَشْيَاءِ وَإِنْ كَانَتْ مِنْ حَيْثُ اسْتِنَادِ وُجُودِهَا إِلَى الْأَمْرِ الْإِلَهِي عَلَى حَدٍّ سَوَى. Although everything is attributed to Allah's will, it is a requirement of Tawheed Af'ali, unity of God with respect to action. بحيث إذا تحقق الإذن والأمر تحققت عن أسبابها. When Allah wants, then they can be performed by the agents and the factors that are related. وَإِذَا لَمْ يَتَحَقَّقِ الْإِذْنُ وَالْأَمْرُ لَمْ تَتَحَقَّقْ. They don't come to existence. أي لم تتم السببية. So far is the same. But إلا أن قسما منها وهو المعجزة من الأنبياء أو ما سأله عبد ربه بالدعاء لا يخلو عن إرادة موجبة منه تعالى. So the difference is that in this case we have a will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which makes it necessary to have that miracle or to have acceptance of that prayer. So this was where I asked you to think about it. What is the difference between the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here and in other cases? Did you think about it? If you want to reflect on this point, it seems that we have to distinguish between two things. When Allah's will is there, at the very final stage of completion of the causal system. So for example, a person wants to do something good or bad. A person, for example, wants to kill another person. A person wants to, give food to someone, give poison to someone, anything good or bad. It can only be a result when Allah's will is there. Yeah? They put Ibrahim alayhi salam into fire, but they could not burn him because Allah's will was not there. But when Allah's will come, and that is at the very end, then that thing is necessarily happening. Because the complete cause is there. So, whether it is miracle, or it is no ordinary action, or it's magic, the will of Allah which comes at the end makes it necessary. So why Allah says that the will of Allah in the case of miracles and acceptance of dua is mujaba, it's something which necessitates existence of that effect. In the other cases is not necessitating. Perhaps what he means is the will which is different from this will. In the case of miracles, in the case of acceptance of prayer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has got an extra will. Either you can say it's a legislative will that Allah has, or you can say a combination of legislative will and generative will. This is a very important point that I was hoping you can think about it so that you are prepared. Because now when I say something, maybe you don't appreciate it because you have not thought about it. But anyway, I have to say it. You know, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has generative will. Okay? And this is not a sign of Allah being pleased with something, Allah endorsing something. It's just because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in charge of the world. Everything which happens, it's according to His permission, according to His power. So even if it is a sin, if it is a crime, still Allah's will is there. Okay? But it is al-iradatu takwiniyah. Then we have legislative will, al-iradatu tashri'iyah. In the case of good things, Allah has legislative will. Allah wants them to happen. Okay? When we have legislative will, it's only about good things, but it doesn't mean that they must happen. There are many things that Allah has wanted, but they have not happened. They are not decisive. Yeah? For example, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. But do we have justice? In many cases, no. Do we have ihsan and benevolence? In many cases, no. But Allah wants this. Or Allah yanha an al-fahsha'i wal-munkari wal-baghi. What in many cases we have these ugly actions and injustice. This is Allah's legislative will, which only belongs to good things, but it's not decisive. May be fulfilled, may be actualized, may not. We have generative will, which is always decisive, but it may be something that Allah is pleased with or not. So they overlap. Yeah? Sometimes for something there is generative will and legislative will, both. Sometimes there is legislative will, not generative will, and sometimes there is generative will, not legislative will. Okay? So there's overlap. Now the question is, when Allah says that the will of Allah in the case of miracles is necessary and decisive and definite, if He means generative, so it is always necessary. If He means legislative, it's never necessary. So what does He mean? No, when Allah says in the case of miracles, Allah's will is mujabeh, means it necessitates. Does He mean generative will, or He means legislative will? If He means generative will is always the very last part of the complete cause, and when that's there, it must happen. If he means legislative, so legislative will never necessitates anything. This is the question. Is the question clear? The answer is that yes, in many cases when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something in legislative will, He doesn't make it necessary. Allah leaves it to us to go after it voluntarily. Okay? So for example, He says, I want justice. But He doesn't force us. He leaves it to us, and if we are, committed, then Allah, of course, helps us. But He doesn't force us. But there are certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, and they are definitely going to happen. There are certain things that Allah wants legislatively, and He is going to make sure that these are achieved. It's not that He says, I want justice, and this justice can happen or cannot happen. Full stop. No, He says, I want justice. This justice may not happen soon, but finally it must be achieved. This world would not come to an end unless that justice is achieved. Okay? So we are free to either establish justice or not, to oppose justice or to be indifferent. But this can only cause delay. Our generation may not be fortunate enough to be that generation that establish this justice. But Allah's general plan is not going to change. If for centuries people, don't bother about justice, finally this will be achieved. So, yeah. So there are certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it necessary to happen, even if they are related to legislative will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kataballahu la'aghlibanna ana wa rusuli, I think refers to this. It doesn't just mean that, like everything else, when the chain of causality is completed, then you become successful. Okay, if that is the case, so even when bad people were successful, Allah had wanted that. Okay? This doesn't mean this. This also doesn't mean that Allah loves His apostles to be successful and victorious. Just loves that. No, it must be something more. Allah loves that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala generatively also makes sure that this is going to happen. Okay? But without taking away our freedom. So this is very important point. How can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make sure that this happens without taking away our freedom? If He wants to take away our freedom, then the whole point is lost. He could have established this, forcefully right from the beginning. He wants us to be free. But at the same time, He has plans that finally will be actualized. How does that work? This is a beautiful part of Allah's plan, that He is leaving us free, but at the same time, nothing goes out of His control. So at the end, everything is according to His general plan. So you have to now find out, how is it possible that people are free, but at the same time we can be 100% sure that what Allah wants happens? What type of generative will? The generative will which comes at the end. Okay, at the end depends then on our performance. If we don't want it, it doesn't come.
We can change some part of this puzzle, but the puzzle is planned by Allah.
You know why at the moment we don't have that ultimate justice? Because we don't want it.
We don't, and also Allah didn't want it.
No, Allah wants it all the time. But Allah says, I want you to establish this. لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Okay? Allah wants us to establish justice. So He wants justice, but He says, I want you to decide yourself to establish justice. Okay. The previous generation, the same.
If we ascribe our will to Allah's will, then, our rejection of justice maybe could be ascribed to Allah's will.
But that is generative will. That is like, you can say, even Yazid, when he killed Imam Hussein,
He justified.
he had generative will. Yes.
He guides us in a way that we want that the same will that Allah wants, that we match it together.
How? He has guided also previous generations.
No, because through our freedom, we reach to the state that we want exactly what God wants at the end of the day.
But that must not take away our freedom. So
Through
you can have that guidance and still refuse.
our freedom, like man, for example, man does so much evil through his freedom until he reaches a point where he realizes himself that the will is like the right path is the right path. So he matches the will of Allah. So, for example, when it comes to talking on, like the example of governments, people will try every single government until they realize that actually the right government is with the Imam. So then they'll match the will that Allah wanted, which is justice. And man, through his freedom, came to that one himself, that same will. So both will came together, and then.
But does it make necessary that even if you have that experience of trying everything and then being frustrated with everything else, is it still necessary that you must say, I want justice? Yeah. Or even in that time you can say, I don't want justice? Because human beings are free.
But it's through your freedom that you found that.
Yeah, you found that, but because you are free, you may say, still I don't want to accept this. Although I know that this is the best solution, I don't want this.
Putting an obstacle like a wall in a street. We are free, but we can't go through the wall, and we can reach it and going after the wall. Because of that, we are free in our view, but
No, if people don't decide to establish justice, so how can you make sure that justice is established after all? So takes away his freedom?
No. These people are going and after them, other people will come.
Okay. So they may decide the same.
No. They decide to do as well as God wish. They decide by themselves.
You hope this.
No.
You cannot say 100% this is happening.
Yes, this is what Quran says that.
Yeah, so we want to understand, we want to explain how Quran says this. Why Quran doesn't say this about other things. No, the question is that although people make history, but how can Allah have some laws for history despite the freedom of people, and that can govern the history?
You can say the freedom of people doesn't extend beyond that world. It's like if you give a child an area to play within, and you can't go outside that world. He's going to play within, so it's still inside your world, inside the barrier that you've created.
Yeah, but to want or not to want justice is within your boundaries. It's not outside your boundary. You cannot decide to be man or woman or be born in this age or not that. But whether you want justice or not, it's within your access. So what if people say we don't want?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
It seems that this is kind of knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us that
No, it's more than
finally-
knowledge. No, this is more than knowledge. It's Allah's will. When Allah says, وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعَفُوا, this is not just Allah knows. Knowledge is even for corruption. Allah knows even the corruption is going to happen. This will of Allah, كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَأَغْلِبَنَّ وَرَسُولُهُ هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَ رَسُولَهُ بِالْهُدَى وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى. This is much more than Allah knows what is going to happen in future. Because His knowledge is equal for good and bad things.
Okay, He wills and knows that we and the people finally.
He wills what?
Wills the justice, for example.
Okay, so this is the question. So how people can be free at the same time Allah has willed justice to happen?
He will and He wants us to.
What if we don't?
From justice.
The question is,
Yeah, this is the question that
Legislative.
legislative will doesn't have power.
100% sure.
Legislative will is something is there for thousands of years. Allah has wanted justice,
But
and
at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that people finally will choose the justice.
We have freedom.
no, knows is different.
We have freedom.
If you say Allah knows, so there is no sense in saying كتب الله الأغلى ونريد أن نمن وأرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره. Allah has much more active role.
Okay, it means that
So my question is precisely how you can define active role for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in history and at the same time believe in human freedom. This is the question. It's a very important question. Allah is very active in history, but at the same time, we are free. This is what you have to discover. How can you have these two together?
I mean, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepares some conditions that people choose freely and with their way to justice, the good things.
Like what?
For example, He sent apostles and guidance, and He knows that finally the human being will
Just He knows?
knows and He have prepared some conditions.
No,
And-
those conditions are even today available. If you mean by condition, those conditions don't make it necessary to have
those
justice.
conditions are going to be complete in the future.
Without our freedom or with our freedom?
No, with our freedom.
With-
Our freedom is one of these conditions. Is part of these conditions.
So then how do you put Allah's will and our freedom together? If it is decisive, if it's not just legislative.
What if it's not decisive? What if it's
In other words, legislative will of Allah is before our choice and action. Generative will that our philosophers speak about it comes after our choice.
But at the same time, that we are doing something.
Yeah, after our choice, before the action. So it's the final stage. So you decide everything, and then if Allah permits, that happens. But now we are talking about something which is neither before nor after. I mean, neither in the like legislative. It's before, but not like legislative. And not after like the normal generative. Something which is decisive and it's already there or eternally there. This is something new that you have to find out. That how can Allah, and these are not many things. In many cases, we have simple legislative will and simple generative will. But there are certain things that Allah has necessarily planned for the world. These are like general laws of the universe. And they are going to happen, definitely. But how we still can have freedom of human beings and have those wills of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That is the question. Yes.
Can you say here that those people who are so much influential among the people are leaders?
Yeah.
But in previous times, imagine that didn't give the Prophet so much power to lead the leaders of the community, of the people. But at the end, Allah did not give that much power to the leader. For example, like Imam Zaman, like Hadith, when they come again, Allah gives them so much power, both material power and technology, and manavi. And through that, they can lead the leaders of the people. And the ordinary people follow those leaders, and they can.
I don't think the problem in the past was that we didn't have strong leaders. We have had strong leaders, We had the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
No, they didn't use that much power that they could.
Why?
That they could use.
Why? Why they didn't use, and then the leader of Akhir Zaman is going to use? There must be an explanation.
For example, about the Mizan, we have this hadith that when he comes, he touches the head of the people, and the understanding of people will improve. But we didn't have such a big miracle in previous prophets.
No. This is not the reason for this difference. Otherwise, why the Prophet didn't do this? If Imam Zaman is going to sort out things miraculously, so the Prophet also could sort out things miraculously. These are not the major things. Imam Zaman will be supported by supernatural, powers. But these are not the decisive things. The decisive thing is that people must want.
Yes.
Otherwise, this could have happened before. Even in the time of the Prophet, there were many cases that Allah supported the Prophet in a very supernatural way. Yeah? These are not major issues. The major issue is that the people must themselves willingly want something. And divinely appointed leaders are there to help people when people want, when people appreciate. They don't want to force. Okay? So if people have to want, so what happens that Allah says, certain things I want to happen in this world? Is He taking away our freedom for some period of time and says, I take away your freedom, then this must happen? Or no, He still leaves our freedom to be there. Yeah.
It's something to do with the verse of the call that Allah gave, that He will put every disbeliever in the fire of hell. So you can say that this is a law that Allah has decreed, and there's another will at the same time, for example, justice, and there cannot be contradiction in Allah's will. Like there's two wills, they can't bang into each other. So if Allah has willed that there will be freedom of choice for mankind, and at the same time He willed that there has to be justice in the world, they can't contradict each other. So they have to run in parallel until
But the will for freedom is the underlying, because this will for freedom of human beings is what makes human beings. A human being without free will is not a human being. Allah could have created angels. Free will is something that is very much part of being a human being. Okay? So, yeah, let me a little bit help you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala definitely is not taking away our freedom. Okay? But how do we use our freedom? This is very important. How you make a decision. You have to analyze the process for making decision. Many people, when they make decisions, their decisions are driven by their emotions. Their decisions are driven by their memories, their thoughts. I think, I have thought about this a lot. I think most of the people don't actually study the cases properly, and when they have solid, conclusion, they make a decision. Most of the people, as soon as something comes to their mind, they do it. Why? For example, because they had similar case like this before many times. So they had made a decision, sometime before, or because they're used to it, they do it automatically. Many of our decisions are based on repetition, on habits, or on emotions. It's very hard you find a person that for every decision that he makes, he considers this as a new case. It's very important. If you are a doctor, medical doctor, and you have been doctor for 20 years, there is a danger that every patient that comes to you, you consider him to be like previous cases. So as soon as he says 2-3 points, you write the prescription because you had hundreds of these people before. You don't study this properly. You don't say that maybe this is a new case. You are used to it. We have always ready-made decisions, unfortunately. Or for example, when someone is speaking to me, if I like him, I accept. If I don't like him, I reject. I don't listen carefully to what he says. In many cases like this, we are not really that rational. We were talking about this in last lecture in the Shrine, about following the requirement of reason. You don't find that much people accept or reject because of reason. Most of the time, emotions are there. Most of the time, memories, good memories, bad memories. For example, sometimes I want to buy a house. I go, and as soon as I look at the house, I say, I don't want this. Why? Do I have rational reason for that? No. Perhaps this house looks like a house that some bad memory happened to me like that. Or this house is, for example, a special, color, I don't like it. It's not rational. Or sometimes we even get married for emotional reasons, not for rational reasons. Yeah? Or sometimes we don't get married for emotional things. We reject cases for just emotional. Of course, I'm not against emotions, but you have to be in control of your emotion, and you should let emotion to be functioning as much as it's rational. So if you want to get married with someone, you must love that person's face, or, for example, the way that person looks, for example. Because if you don't do this, maybe tomorrow you are not strong enough to remain with your decision and create problem. Today you say, I can marry with everyone, but tomorrow then you create problem for that person, for example. So emotions have some role to play, and you have to be taking that into account. But never emotions must make decisions. Or never I must make decision according to the emotions. In other words, anything is like a currency that must finally be exchanged to one currency. And that is rational data. The only currency that can be used and spent is rational data. Even emotions must be translated into rational data. Okay? This is something that we need to discuss maybe in another time. Anything which is not possible to be transformed to some rational data cannot be assessed by intellect. So if it is not possible to be accessed by and assessed by intellect, so it must not have any role in our decision as a rational human being. So you understand? I'm not saying emotions are not important, but emotions must finally be able to prove themselves rationally to us. Okay? So, this is what must be the case, what should be the case. But unfortunately, 99% of cases, I think, we don't make decisions according to the rational data and rational argument that we have provided for ourselves. It's mostly through emotions, habits, liking, disliking, these kind of things. Therefore, it's possible to have free people, but at the same time making sure that they do what you like without convincing them. Not because you are taking away their freedom, because they are not using their freedom. If you know the system that they make decision, then you can somehow manipulate them. They don't become robots. They are still human beings. But you can use them like robots. You know, this is the power of propaganda. How does propaganda work? Because they have made lots of survey. They know how people make decisions. They know that when people, for example, want to buy a mobile, for example, or a car, or a house, what factors they take into account. Okay? Which are not necessarily rational factors. They use those factors and they sell their goods and products to you. Or for example, if they want even to sell you, for example, a laptop, they know that you are not that much rational. So they put a big poster of that laptop on the lap of a beautiful girl. Because of that beautiful girl, then in your mind you love that laptop. And you go and buy that laptop. But this is not rational. You can put a bad laptop on a beautiful girl's lap or vice versa. So, but this is what most of people do. Most of people make decisions like this. So, if you know these techniques, then you can manipulate people. Sometimes, for example, what they do is that they know that the adults don't make decisions so easily. So they use children to sell their goods. Because children have power to insist and they force parents to buy for them. So there was a debate in one of the Western countries about being permissible to have advertisement in the schools. Some people were against that. They said, we should not make a school a place for propaganda. But some people said, no, it's good opportunity, we can generate money. One of the things that was mentioned in the debate was this, that the children, when they see some advertisement in the walls of the school, then they go and pressurize their parents. And then the parents are forced to buy because then they have difficulty, the children cry or, they are not happy. Now how much you have to buy to please your children? PlayStation 1, 2, I don't know what is now available, 3. So the power sometimes comes through children. So, if you know how these work, you can really plan everything and make sure that your products are sold without forcing people. You are not forcing people in the sense of philosophically they are not free. They are still free. Philosophically they are free. But you have manipulated their freedom. Okay? And I think magic is also like this. Because I have been also thinking how magicians can make sure that what we do is according to their will. When they do magic, they do, for example, certain things on you that then you have problem. For example, Quran says, يَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. they used to learn some magic, and then they were dividing husbands and wives. This is a very important question for me. How do they do that? Do they force human beings? I don't think so. I don't think anyone can force you. But they bring bad things to your mind, and because you are not rational, you follow them. Okay? Think about it, and inshallah another time we discuss. This is a very important discussion. How magicians can work and create problems. So, human beings can be free, but at the same time, you can put in their mind ideas, thoughts, memories, suspicions, and therefore, most of the time, they act according to what you want. This can be something that is done by bad people or can be done by good people. You can have this mechanism to encourage people to do good things. You can, for example, instead of selling them goods to make money, in this way you can sell them virtues and make them virtuous people. If you use similar system, of course, we don't manipulate people, but we can encourage people. Sometimes, for example, if you want to encourage your child, for example, to say his prayer or her prayer, okay? Of course, you must not force that child because it must be done voluntarily, but you can use some techniques that the child would emotionally love to say the prayer, and then gradually would intellectually also want the prayer. So you can use some techniques. Of course, I don't want this to be extreme, because I think this is something bad. I am not very much in favor of using emotions radically. Sometimes I think, this is also what is happening in some kind of azadari, some kind of, maddahi, that they bombard people with emotional techniques, not that much understanding. And these emotional techniques can make you a good person momentarily, or can make you a person who is ready to go and do nonsense. This can happen. Sometimes, for example, there are people who are able to give motivational, a speech. If, for example, they want to kill the Shia, they can bring, some motivational lecturers and show them something. So emotionally, they bombard them that, the person becomes ready to even kill himself and kill other people. This is not good. Even for good cases, I don't like this. We have always to make sure that people make decisions according to their intellect. But you can facilitate, only facilitate, not manipulate. Only facilitate this by helping them emotionally. That's enough. So don't force people, for example, to cry and then listen to you. But benefit from this only as much as their heart becomes soft, so that they can listen to you and evaluate. You know what I'm saying? Yes. There's a difference. So sometimes, for example, we have 100 of youths. We bring a person who puts them into cry and has control over their emotions. But what else? Nothing. Sometimes we bring a person who has no emotion. It's like a machine. Always speaks, monotone. Everything is like a machine. No effect. You have to have a person who can engage them emotionally, but convince their heart. Give them some information, some good argument to digest. This is what we have to do. You have question?
Yes.
Yes.
What about some sermons or some lectures that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam did before some wars?
The same.
And Imam used those techniques.
Those, as I said, those techniques to soften the heart, but then convince them. This is good. Like our ulama, for example, at the beginning or at the end, they do a little, for example, Marsiya, people cry. They feel soft in their heart, but it's not the whole thing. The whole thing is to educate people, to teach people. But unfortunately, sometimes we do 1 hour, 2 hours of just emotional thing, and if you later make a text of what was said, what this Maddah said in 1 hour, you don't find even one new point or one, good point. It's always just playing with the words. I'm not saying about everyone, but many cases. You don't learn anything. You don't feel that your knowledge is increased. So they can do this for crying for Imam Hussein. They can do this for laughing and celebrating. They can do this for marriage. They can do this even for other things. Even sometimes these people are invited for weddings, for other purposes, If you want to, for example, launch a new product, you can use these motivational speakers. So I am not against the people who do the job properly, but I'm saying that this must not be our priority. We should. For example, another thing is about having good mood. Sometimes, for example, when you recite Du'a Kumail or, Du'a Nudbe or Du'a Iftitah, you feel very good. Sometimes you don't have any feeling. Does it mean that when you don't have good feeling, Allah doesn't love your dua? No. These feelings are very much changeable. Sometimes you don't have good feeling because of good reasons. Sometimes you don't have good feeling because of the things which are not necessarily in your control. The late Ibn Fahd al-Hilli, he says in Uddat al-Da'i, you should not pray only when you have good feeling. These moods and this what we say hal is not necessarily a sign of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You may see a person is reading dua and not crying. Another person reciting dua or reciting Quran and crying. You cannot say this one who is crying is better. No, maybe he's not better. Maybe he's better, but you cannot judge. Feelings, emotions, these kind of things are not showing and proving that a person is making progress.
Because we have some order to cry during the prayer.
No. If,
for example, Dua Arafa, we have at the end of this dua,
no,
force yourself for crying.
no, that must be through ma'rifah, through understanding. Some.
Crying with ma'rifah. Force yourself for
Let me give you an example. This is very helpful, inshallah. Sometimes you have a garden. Okay? I say this garden would be very good if we have, delicious apples. These delicious apples would make this garden perfect. If you are clever, what you do is you plant apple trees, look after apple trees, and then they gradually bear fruits, and then you will have apple fruits. If you are not clever, you go and buy from market apples and say, look, we have apple here. I don't like these apples. I like apple fruits, which are the fruits of this garden. When Ahlul Bayt say, should cry, they don't mean to go and buy tears from music and melodies that can make you into tears. It means that you have to grow the trees of understanding, of ma'rifah, of love for Ahlul Bayt, that automatically you cry. Cry must be naturally coming, not that you force yourself to cry. I don't think that has value, that you force yourself or someone manipulates you and you cry. Cry must come naturally. And even if you cannot cry, if you have that ma'rifah, it's okay. Maybe for some reason you cannot cry. Maybe you have cried so much that the tears are dry. So, sometimes when we see the hadith encouraging something, or for example, about the signs of mu'min. For example, some of the signs of mu'min, people want to do a shortcut. They think that, for example, when Ahlul Bayt say these are the signs of mu'min, so if I have those signs, then I am mu'min. No. These are the signs that must come naturally because you are mu'min. Otherwise, it's like a person who says, doctors have white dress. This is the sign of a doctor. So I put on a white dress, then I'm a doctor. Or ulama have amameh. The sign of ulama is they have amameh. So how can I become alim? Put on amameh. No. This is the sign which comes at the end of a process. You want to bypass and just go for the end result. You haven't achieved anything. Do you understand? So, in the case of people's making decision, what happens is that because they are not always acting rationally, many factors can bear on their decision so that they don't actually use their freedom. Okay? So if you want to make that person act as you like, you don't need to take away his freedom. You can bombard him or give him some information so that he don't think properly. Or, for example, you can make him drunk. Or you can, show him some movies and excite him. And they do like this. But what about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Does Allah manipulate people? No. Allah never does this. Allah never bombards people, with, these kind of things so that they do what He wants. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِيَهْلِكَ مَنْ هَلَكَ عَنْ بَيِّنَهِ وَيَحْيَى مَنْ حَيَّ عَنْ بَيِّنَهِ. So everything must be very clear, and the person must know what he is doing. Okay? What I said was to make it clear for you that it's possible to somehow make decisions without losing your free will, but according to what someone is planning. But in the case of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's different. And I don't know whether I should say it or you want to think about it.
Oh.
Pardon?
In some cases, we make decisions without reason, irrational. But there is some point, like, for instance, Pharaoh and his wife. His wife picked up Moses from the Nile.
Yeah.
But if they find Moses in the normal case, like a horse, maybe he will be caught, he will be killed. But they find Moses at the river, on the river, on the Nile. It's not the ordinary case. It's extraordinary. So they didn't kill him. They take it and they train it, and at the end he becomes enemy.
I didn't get your point. So you want to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them.
Yes, control of decision extra in some cases. Extra normally maybe you can say.
So they did it voluntarily.
Yes, voluntarily, but in a unnormal can say they
Extraordinary.
extraordinary cases.
How?
Condition. Maybe, for instance, Pharaoh wants to kill Moses, so he killed a lot of children. But when they want Moses, the child on the river, and his wife, with his dog, he take it and train it because it's extraordinary cases.
Maybe what you want to say is this, if I understood you correctly. That, for example, although Pharaoh had decided to kill all the sons or the boys of Bani Israel, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't force him. And for example, in the case of Moses, made him unable to use his freedom. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala planned it in the way that the wife of Pharaoh saw this boy before Pharaoh and Pharaoh agents, and the wife of Pharaoh loved this child, and the wife asked Pharaoh, and Pharaoh, although could say no, he was not forced, but he didn't say no. So in that particular moment, because of the role of the emotions and love or respect or perhaps anything between him and his wife, he didn't decide to kill this boy. He was free, but he didn't kill. How? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that Pharaoh cannot say no to his wife in this case, for example. Although he is still free. You understand? So it's not always black and white. Either you are free or you are not free. You are free, but you can use some techniques. You know, like for example, I know that you are a person that you respect very much your father. So sometimes I ask your father, could you please tell your son to do this for me? So your freedom is not taken away, but I am using a technique to make sure that you freely agree. Okay? So, in the case of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He knows what every person is loving or, hating or so on and so forth, so He can plan things in the way that people decide freely to do what He wants without being able to say on the day of judgment that I was forced. I had no freedom. I had no choice. This is good in these cases like Pharaoh and like other people. But for the case of ultimate establishment of justice, we need something more than this. What you said is very good for particular cases. Indeed, in many cases, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has such a beautiful, plan that even His enemies become His agent. They want to defeat the truth, and they don't know that how they themselves have served the truth. لا يزال يؤيد هذا الدين برجل فاسق. Pharaoh wanted to kill Musa, and because of Musa he killed many people, but then Allah made sure that Pharaoh look after Musa without Pharaoh being forced. This is beautiful. Pharaoh was not forced.
By its freedom.
And freely brought up Musa. And if Musa was not brought up by Pharaoh, perhaps he couldn't have that power. Because he was brought up in the palace of Pharaoh and he knew everything, he knew every secret of Pharaoh. He was respected. He had lots of power and support and confidence. Maybe if he was brought up by his mother, he would not have reached that point that now he is brought up by wife of Pharaoh. Perhaps you can say, I am not saying 100%, perhaps you can say wife of Pharaoh was more pious than mother of Musa. Perhaps, because in the Quran, ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا امْرَأَةَ فِرْعَوْنَ. Yeah? And mother of Musa perhaps was not at that. In any case, the fact that he was brought up by wife of Pharaoh and in the court and palace of Pharaoh gave lots of support to him. So, مَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ يُرِيدُونَ لِيُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ. And then Allah doesn't say وَاللَّهُ حَافِظُ نُورِهِ وَاللَّهُ مُتِمُّ نُورِهِ. Yeah? He doesn't say I am protecting my light. He says I am going to make it even more complete. You know, like for example, if you have a fire and someone blows into fire, the fire becomes stronger. Yeah? Because it needs oxygen. So, when people oppose Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without them understanding, they help. But they are not rewarded for that. They cannot say, for Pharaoh cannot say, oh Allah, I looked after Musa. Please reward me. No. Because you didn't want this. Although you did this, like, you know, sometimes we say, for example, Saddam Hussein, one of the things that he did, he spread the followers of Ahlul Bayt nearly to all over the world. Now, every place you go, you have Iraqis. And this is a spread of the school of Ahlul Bayt. Maybe if we wanted to encourage people to travel and go all over the world, we couldn't do this. But the force of Saddam did this. And because these people are also were under pressure, so they gave them asylum status. So other countries welcome them. If now the Shias of Iraq want to go, no one welcomes them. Yeah? The same with, you know, for example, many people who have gone, you know, because of other, you know, tyrant regimes. So sometimes you see that something is done by an enemy, but in the long term, it's good. It doesn't mean that they are not free. They are free. But they freely occur inside a big plan by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at the end, what they do is better for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They create, you know, like for example, if you want to make, for example, you know, a kind of, I don't know, presentation, for example, or a play. And in your play, you want to show that there is a, for example, doctor who is able to treat people who are very ill. Okay? So you bring a person to act as a doctor, to, you know, play the role of a doctor. Then you need a person to look as an ill person. To make this play very nice and attractive, it's better to find a person who is really ill. Yeah? A person who is really ill, pale, thin. So you go and find a person who is really ill and bring him into this play. Illness of this person and the germs which are in the body of this person makes your play more perfect. If it was not real illness and real germ, maybe it didn't look that perfect. It doesn't mean that you wanted that person to be ill. Yeah? But you can benefit even from bad things and make even bad things part of a picture. So like when you make a painting or drawing, you can use all colors. You don't say, I only use, light color. You can use even black color, gray color. Yeah? Everything can be used. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a big plan, and everyone, even the enemies of Allah, whether they like it or not, they serve Him. Even you may accept, even Shaitan, without wanting, he is doing a very important role. This doesn't mean that Allah is happy with what he did. It's like that ill person, it's like the germ. But Shaitan even is part of the plan. He didn't know. And Allah didn't force him. Allah even didn't want this. But it's not that now that Shaitan has rebelled, Allah says, oh, I had another plan. Now I don't know what to do. My plan was to have all human beings in heaven. You destroyed and spoiled my plan. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made His plan in the way that even what Shaitan didn't damage His plan. And Shaitan became part of this. Okay? And perhaps one reason that why Allah gave him permission إِلَى يَوْمَ الْوَقْتِ الْمَعْلُومِ is this. That now that you have rebelled, okay, you can have this role till that time. This is a way to test people, to try people. We need some ill and germ people, to be here. Without legislatively wanting this, without forcing anyone to be like this. Okay, I think we should think about it, and inshallah, perhaps in the next session we can continue this discussion. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.